Regular meeting of the Village of Villa Park Planning and Zoning Commission to order. Let's start with roll call. Calvert.
Here.
Hofstra.
Here.
Jackson.
Here.
Case. Ludke.
Here.
Orlowski.
Here.
Romano.
Here.
Schlinsky.
Here.
All right, I have two present, so we have a quorum. We do not have a court reporter this evening as we don't have any public hearings on the agenda. Minutes are being taken. Do I have a motion to proceed without a court reporter this evening?
So me.
I have a motion on my right.
Second.
Second from Commissioner Orlowski. All in favor of that motion?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes. We will proceed. Next order of business would be the approval of the minutes from 3/10/22. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make the motion.
We have a motion.
Second.
Seconded. Any questions or comments on the minutes or the motion? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so the minutes are approved. There are no public hearings this evening, as I said. So the first order of our regular business would be the concept plan review / presentation for PZ 220005, 27 West Park, Ardmore Flats, Ross Builders, owner and petitioner. I think the way I'm going to handle this, unless anyone has a problem with it, is we'll have the petitioner present what you guys want to do. Then anyone from the public who has any questions or comments, they can direct those to me. After that, if you want to address any of those questions, we can give you an opportunity. It's not a public hearing. You don't have to address them if you don't have the answer tonight. And if we have questions, comments up here, we will ask those of you at that time, and then we'll give you a chance to wrap up if you have anything you want to say at the end. So whenever you're ready.
All right. Good evening, Commissioners. Thanks for your time tonight. My name is Craig Ross. I'm with Ross Builders. We're a third-generation general contractor in the western suburbs. That'd be great. Thanks. For over 20 years, we've done dozens of high-end projects in the western suburbs, and we're actually currently finishing an apartment building in Downers Grove and starting one in Wheaton, very similar to the proposed development we have at 27 West Park Boulevard, which we're calling Ardmore Flats. So 27 West Park Boulevard is a property located at the southeast corner of the intersection of Park Boulevard and Princeton. The property is in the MXT district, which is mixed transitional, and our proposed development would be multifamily and would fall under the general building requirements of the Village Park zoning ordinance. Ardmore Flats would be a luxury 24-unit, 4-story apartment building, which we think is a great fit for the new MXT zoning. It seems to fulfill the intent of this district, which is to accommodate low to mid-scale residential buildings transitioning between shopping and single-family homes. We also feel this development would be a great catalyst for the area, which hasn't seen any new development in decades, and it would also provide new patrons for the nearby stores and restaurants in the Ardmore Avenue Business District. This is the current site. Right now, it's an office space, but it used to be a gas station or an auto repair. This is the proposed site plan. It's a little small up there on the screen, but basically, you know, again, we're at the corner. The building would have indoor parking and outdoor parking and 2 dwelling units on the front facade. The entrance to the indoor parking or garage would be off of Princeton on the west side. Here's some floor plans. The second and third floor would have 8 units each. They'd be 4 one-bedroom, 2-bath den units, and then there'd be 4 2-bedroom, 2-bath units. The fourth floor is a little bit smaller, so it's set back. There's only 6 units on that floor. There'd be 4 one-bedroom, 2 baths, and a den, and then 2 2-bedroom and 2 baths. These are our proposed elevations. As far as materials, the dark gray or almost black would be brick. And then we've got everything else would be siding, but different colors of siding, different types of siding to kind of break things up. Obviously, this is a two-dimensional image, so there's a lot of depth going on, a lot of depth change, I should say, that's going on that you can't tell from this 2D. Wanted to kind of give you a timeline of what we've been doing behind the scenes. We've been working with this for about 6 months now with the staff in the village. We actually met first in November 1st with Consuelo and Patrick, presented our ideas, which are very, very similar to 2005, 2007 PUDs that were approved for this site, but never obviously were followed through with. On November 4th, after we presented our ideas, Consuelo got back to me just to confirm some of our ideas and some of our thoughts for the site. She confirmed that we could do an apartment building at this site, and it would be considered a general building, and she was okay with the garage access on Princeton. So on December 20th, we closed on the property, so I am the owner of the property. From there, we had our own site plans done. My architect, Greg Starr from Studio 21 is here. He can answer any questions also. We did a preliminary site plan, so we then came back in on January 19th to meet with the village staff again. Staff was very supportive, and they actually recommended that we present it to the Traffic and Safety Commission. So on February 1st, we met with the Traffic and Safety Commission, presented the site plan to them, and they supported it also. We went further along with the plans. We added the floor plans that you saw. We did the elevations. We presented those to the staff at another meeting on March 15th. Consuelo is no longer with the village, so we met with Ellen and the rest of the staff, and Ellen had recommended that we meet with the Planning and Zoning Commission, which is puts us here today. So in order to make the project viable, we'd be looking for one variance, and then a couple of other, maybe an administrative adjustment and another thing that I'll talk about that we're not sure what we're looking for. It could be administrative adjustment, could be a text amendment, could be a variance, could be nothing, which is again part of the reason why we're here, because we need some clarification on the zoning ordinance. So as far as parking is concerned, there's 10 one-bedroom units and 14 two-bedroom units. The zoning ordinance requires 1 parking space or spot per bedroom, so that would mean we'd need 38 spots. We're proposing 33 spots. 22 of those spots would be in the interior parking, that's the light blue area. 11 of the spots would be in the dark blue area on the exterior along the backside of the property where the alley is. So we'd be seeking a variance for 5 parking spaces. We did have a traffic assessment performed by KLOA, and they actually estimated that the parking demand for this building would be 25 to 31 vehicles. So we're under certainly the 33 that we're proposing. We've done, again, we deal with multifamily in the past, and we found that modern day tenants have a lot less cars, a lot less use for cars, especially when there's nearby stores and restaurants. They're accessible via, bikes or walking. A lot of people are working from home. So again, KLOA confirms our thoughts on that also. Also, the 2 PUDs that I mentioned back in 05 and 07, they were actually short 15 required spaces, and those 2 projects were approved. So this is the other reason why we're here, to try to get some advice on as far as the driveway and garage access. So in the code 4.4.3.8.9, driveway access, well, first, we're proposing, as I mentioned before, we're proposing the driveway off of the west side, off of Princeton. And again, we had presented this to the planning department, including Consuelo. They thought that was a good idea, and we're good with it. We also, again, showed that to the Traffic and Safety Commission. They were good with it. But then when we met with Ellen, she thought it might require a variance. So I actually reached out to Leslie Overholzer with Codometrics, and we have an email from her that certainly we can show you. She said that it might even be an error the way it's written, because it kind of conflicts with the garage access, which we'll talk about next. So that's why we're just not clear, is an administrative adjustment, because the code does mention something about that. Is it a variance? Would we need a text amendment, or is it good as is? That's certainly something we'd like to find out, so we know which way to proceed with this. The garage access seems to be much clearer. Again, if you read the code 4.4.3.8.10, that says that you could do an administrative adjustment based on everything that we have. So here's our facades again. If you looked at the plans on the right elevation, as you can see, and this, again, these plans are just preliminary. This was something that we brought to the planning department, and Ellen brought up a great point that we may not be in compliance with these plans, at least on the transparency and the blank wall limitations, and that's something we can address. So again, on the right elevation, you can kind of see where the garage door is. Some of that blank space over there, we definitely can put in more windows. We could put windows in the door, the garage door, and add some other windows, and certainly get that to where it needs to be. And then the last item you might notice is the entrance. The zoning ordinance seems that it requires entrance to be on the park side, which would be the front of the building. Our lobby is in the northwest corner, so we can put an entrance, we can add an entrance to that side. We could move the entrance to that side. We could keep it on this side. The reason why we had it on the park side is because it'd be better for tenants, at least, who are walking from the rear, from the exterior spaces to get into the lobby. But again, if the commission thought it'd be better to add another one or move it, we certainly can do that. And that's it. And so, again, just to kind of summarize a little bit, so in order to make the project viable, again, we're seeking at least one variance on the parking, and an administrative adjustment, a text amendment, a variance, something we would need possibly on that driveway access. And that's about it. I mean, we're here to get your feedback on these items and anything else that you might have.
All right. All right, I appreciate that. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to speak on this, either with comments or questions? Do it. Yeah, okay, so what I would ask is, you don't need to be sworn in, this isn't a public hearing, but please come up to the podium, state your name and address so we can have that in the minutes, and then 3 or 4 minutes.
Christine Fogarty, 37 West Park. I am the house directly to the west of the property. I have several things I want to go over, but first is that the current zoning is MXT, I believe. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so that is intended to accommodate low to mid-scale buildings. Is 4 stories considered low to mid-scale?
Yes.
It is.
Yes,
Okay.
and it's actually under, I believe in that district, it could actually be 5 stories.
It could.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay. Okay. What would, if you would just do me the honor of explaining this to me, what would be the tallest building currently residential, multi-tenant residential in Villa Park?
Probably, it would be 1500 South Ardmore, I think.
And how tall is that, do you know?
5 or 6 stories. Can't tell you off the top of my head, but
Okay.
it's down by between Willowbrook and the shopping center.
Next to the fire.
Oh, yeah, that mammoth thing.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Okay. Don't get me wrong, we're really excited about having something new here, but 4 stories just seems a little bit too big for that area. So I walk a mile in the perimeter of that every day. And 4-story building is the Ovaltine building, the original structure, which I'm sure is, by different height because it was a factory initially, but I'm trying to visualize that in an already established neighborhood of small 2-story homes. This doesn't seem to fit.
right.
So from my perspective, if we could maybe scale this down a little bit, it would be great.
Yeah, that will ultimately be up to what their final plan is and
Right.
what the approvals they need from us. But
Okay, and I noticed that you said these are similar. We have no renderings of the actual project currently, correct?
no, we do not, and I hope that whatever ultimately comes before us will have a
Okay.
rendering.
Sorry to interrupt. Those renderings were the ones I showed you, with the brown and the different colors of the siding?
So that's the actual renderings for that property?
Right.
Okay,
Right.
They're flat elevations,
Yeah, they're not 3D. they're
Right.
2D
right,
renderings, yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
All right, I'm sorry, I thought they were for a similar property
no,
that
Okay.
we were working
That's
on.
it, yeah.
Okay,
Right there, and there's a bigger one on the previous page.
Yeah, and just one minor thing to note is that on this is that it is 4 stories, but the RMX, at least the MXT and MXR districts require all the floors above the 3rd floor be set back a specific distance from the street.
okay,
So like along Park, it would be set back, and they are currently doing that. I assume it meets the code, and that's something that would have to be reviewed by staff.
Right.
If it ultimately gets approved.
Yeah, the lightest gray up top is set back. That's why there's only 4 units on the top floor, because those 2 units smaller have been carved out in the front.
okay. And what is the setback on the first floor from Princeton?
The required setback is meant to be built zone, and I believe it's between 12, I think 12 feet. And so I think we're 13. We're at 13 feet off the curve, which was falling right in the build zone requirements. Because the actual zone requires the building to be brought up more street oriented.
So is the current green space along Princeton going to stay? Or
Yeah, I
is
think
the
you're talking
building
about
coming-
Parkway, so yes,
Right,
'cause that's
so
not even our
it's not
property.
coming all the
Yeah,
way to the
it's-
sidewalk?
right. Correct.
Okay. Will there be any green space on the park side?
Could somebody switch back to the site plan for a minute, please? Is that something?
Yeah, it might be better.
There will be about 8 feet between the sidewalk, the existing carriage walk that's up against the curb, and the
Okay.
So the green space that you see on Princeton would still be there. You see the 2 little areas of grass, is that what you were talking about?
Yeah, it's not much, but,
Yeah,
It's actually
More.
They're actually adding green space.
yeah, we're actually gonna be adding to that.
will only be
Okay.
one curb cut for the driveway.
Right. That, we're eliminating a curb cut. There's 2 there now, and so there'd only be 1. So we'd be filling in between those 2.
Can you forward to the proposed site plan?
actually, there's only one there now.
There's,
No,
There
there's
used
just,
to be 2, but there's only
Oh,
one.
is there only-
Right, they actually eliminated.
oh,
it.
there used to be, right.
That aerial site image is
Old.
You're right, there used to be 2, now there's 1, but I think it's still concrete there though, right? They didn't fill that in with grass.
No, it's grass now.
Oh, it is? Okay. There you go. We're eliminating the curb cut on Park.
So all access is coming off of Princeton.
Right. Currently, there's 2 curb cuts, we'd be down to 1.
So we're actually increasing the traffic on our neighborhood little community street there, and then along Park where it's kind of a free-for-all with people driving over the speed limit already, there won't be access.
Well, the code doesn't even allow an access on Park. You cannot do an access on Park in MXT.
Okay.
Doesn't even allow it.
But there's one there now.
Correct. Obviously, anything that's grandfathered in, it's
Right.
grandfathered in.
Okay, so it's gonna go away.
But it has to go away if we do a new development.
Interesting.
It's not
Okay.
allowed.
and we could certainly address the reasoning behind that as part of the code later.
Yeah, I think that would be a great idea. Because it's, my understanding of the actual zoning is to protect the character of an existing established neighborhood, and I feel that this is kind of taking us away from that. And there are other apartment buildings nearby that they've done them very well, so. And kudos to your company, I don't mean to be insulting.
Sure.
You guys have done great work, I've checked it out, but
Great.
maybe if we could just go a little bit smaller, it would be great.
Well, like they mentioned, it actually allows for 5 stories, so we went down a story from there. Obviously, we're following, you know, what the code does, and it actually went down from there.
Yeah. Okay.
And to be frank, I mean, it's not just Villa Park. They're encouraging this type of zoning in a lot of places. Again, making it more of that downtown feel, which, again, the code actually pushes the building towards the streets. It wants that
Like the
downtown
mammoth you're
feel.
putting in Glen Ellen on Main Street there that everyone hates.
Almost every town is encouraging this, and not everyone hates it. A lot of people like them, actually, though.
You don't live across the street from it, I guess. But, all right, that's all I
right.
had. I'm
Thank
sure
you.
that my neighbors have more.
Yeah. All right, anyone else?
I just have one little question.
Yeah, go ahead. Just, can we get your name, please? Can we get your name and address, please, for the record?
Oh, yeah,
yeah.
Janie Nicholson,
Uh-huh,
412 South Princeton.
okay. Okay. And what was your
I think-
question?
I want to ask you this.
Sure.
Did you check with, you know, with it having been a gas station, can you build there?
Yeah, the site's been cleared
That's
previously.
why your parking is street level, so you don't have to go down?
The underground storage tanks are gone.
Yes, they are. They were removed.
Okay.
Yep. Great question, but
You know,
yes.
With the other proposal, nobody knew there was a gas station there.
Yeah, I brought it up right away. There was the gas station there, and before we bought it, I've actually bought a gas station before that we built on, so I'm familiar with, you know, what you need to do and what you make sure is there.
happened? I went because I knew the guy that, you know, Bob Chapel.
Sure.
And anyway, and there was a lot of debris mess. It was a standard gas station.
Right.
And there was all this mess, you know, garbage on, you know, real piled high.
Mhm.
And that neighbors complained and stuff. But anyway, they didn't know there was a gas station there. So then I went down to the York Township Assessor's Office.
Mm-hmm.
And he showed me, you know, I had the folder. There was, you know, Bob's standard gas station. So when I got home, I thought, oh my gosh, I should have asked him for a copy. That was before the phone.
Right, right.
So anyway, I go back there, and there's no record of the gas station. So it must have been pulled out of there. But I'm glad that you know that there was a gas.
There definitely was. Yes, we're aware of it.
That's my main concern.
We appreciate you bringing that up.
So that's good.
Yep.
And would it ever be subsidized housing?
Well, we can't say it wouldn't ever be. That isn't our plan, but, you know, we can't predict what would happen in the future.
How tall are the ceilings inside?
I think they're 9 foot, Greg? 9 foot.
Oh, okay. Okay. I hate seeing such a big building, you know, but I guess I'd rather have it on Ardmore, not on Park and Princeton, you know.
Sure.
Not on that corner.
If you can find me a property on Ardmore, I'll do it.
Yeah. Good. Well, thank you.
You can knock down the one that's right on the corner.
I would love to get the yellow building.
Yeah.
Trust me, it would help all of us. I would love to.
Because when you come out of the parking lot there, or underground, or the parking,
Right?
your lights hit right away the bedroom windows of the 3 houses.
Sure.
That's sort of annoying.
All right.
Oh, and thank you.
No, thank you.
Hi,
Hi.
I'm Anne Marie Testa. I live at 515 South Princeton. So, do you know when the tanks were taken out?
I do not.
And where's the documentation that it actually happened located?
I don't have it with me, but we have it.
Okay. Somebody's going to ask. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, we have to get a loan on property. The banks have to see it. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people that want that, yeah.
Going to ask.
Yeah, and for us to buy the property, we had to have it. So we have it. I just
Okay.
didn't bring it tonight.
Okay. So, you talked about 9-foot ceilings. Do you have a price range in mind?
Well, they'd be apartments, so we'd be renting them for around $2,500.
Is that the bigger one? Or
I
the little one? I mean, I'm just ballparking.
Right.
But are we ballparking that's the big one or the smaller?
you know, let's call it, 25 to 2,700, maybe 2,700 for the larger.
Okay. So this MTX code, I mean, this just seems bizarre to me. This MTX code doesn't allow access on park. I mean, and I appreciate that you jumped right in. Somebody did and said, we can talk more later about
Yeah,
why.
I'll explain the rationale for that, because I was on the commission, I was actually on
Okay.
the,
I mean, that
the
does-
committee that,
Just
yeah.
MTX is applying apparently to a lot of areas. We're pushing this new code in multiple villages, so I'm just curious about that rationale.
Yeah.
So that's all I had for now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, anyone else wishing to speak on this? Okay, so we can move to questions, comments from up here on the dais. But real quickly, to address the kind of the concept of MX districts generally, not specifically the MXT, but the MXT as well. Those districts were created to either try to preserve an existing downtown feel, like along Villa, along Park, or to create one where we would like to have a downtown feel, like in the area around the train station and along St. Charles, because there's a long-term vision of a St. Charles Avenue that is more pedestrian friendly and less high-speed traffic. And the reason that those types of districts would not want to see a curb cut, see a driveway cut through on a street like Park is because you would end up with what we have on St. Charles now, which is a lot of driveways feeding out onto what should read like and act like a pedestrian-friendly street. So in a perfect world, we wouldn't have curb cuts along Park, we wouldn't have curb cuts along Central, we wouldn't have curb cuts along Villa. We do have a few, but every time you have to cross a curb cut, that's not comfortable for a pedestrian. It's a hole in a street wall. It's a void. If you're walking down Villa and there's a store beside you or a restaurant, that activates the street. When you walk past a driveway, even into a parking garage, that's a void. You don't have activity, you don't sense the street life, it deadens the street wall and creates a place where you have more pedestrian interactions with vehicles. If we had the space in a lot of locations, you would want that to be off an alley, right? We don't have a lot of alleys. We have almost none. And the ones we do have are sort of substandard. But that is the kind of the vision and the purpose of those MX districts, because what we don't want is people coming in and blowing holes in Park Avenue or Villa Avenue, and destroying the charm that's there. And we want new buildings to try to respect that to the degree they can. Sometimes that may not be possible, but that's the goal. So I hope that clears that up for everybody. All right. So questions, comments, thoughts on this specific project? I have some, but I'll let other people go first.
Just a clarification, is there I believe our code has a site triangle requirement at corners, and I believe this intersection at Park and Princeton would qualify for that, for sort of site triangle vision, to sort of back off at that. If I, Ellen, does that ring a bell?
The only part of the code I specifically brought with me was the MX portion, and I don't believe it's in there.
No, it would be in just general site.
Yeah, I'm trying to, I know we talked about it with the garden station. So that was the same thing at the corner there. But I don't know.
Yeah, section 9.3 in our code. Because it makes reference, like, right off the bat, 9.3.1, on corner lots in all zoning districts except C1, C2, MX1, MX2, and MX3, nothing may be erected, placed, planted, or allowed to grow between the height of 3 and 10 feet above grade within the required intersection of visibility triangle. And they're showing a 20-foot leg on each sort of property zone. So that's, would sort of foreshorten that lobby location, it appears. So it's something to sort of,
We've kind of discussed this in general, and it's a strange intersection. If you look at the aerial view, there's diagonal parking, or maybe perpendicular parking on Park Boulevard in front of the building, which we'd actually be adding to, because we're gonna.
correct, yeah, we're grabbing that off of,
So, there's a very large parkway on Princeton and a carriage walk, as they call it, on Park, and so where the stop line is, technically on Princeton, if somebody were to be traveling north and looking to turn, is actually really far back from where they'd even be able to see any traffic on Park to begin with, because of the parked cars and because of the way the curve on the other side of Princeton extends out so much further, that it would seem like there's a lot more other visibility impediments that the building wouldn't even really be in the way of the carriage, and especially the angle of the carriage walk to pedestrians, bicyclists.
yeah, I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying
Yeah.
at all, but I'm just saying if I'm reading, you know,
Well,
I have something to hang my hat on, right?
Yeah,
At this,
no,
at this,
and absolutely.
and so,
It also seems that, I mean, and I guess the visibility triangle and the build to zone requirements are a little bit in conflict as well, but yes, I mean, it's a
Sure.
good point, absolutely.
Yeah, and we did read that, and again, you would know better than us, but our first glance up at it, we were under the impression it referred to fences and plantings. Based on what you're saying, it sounds like it doesn't. Sounds like maybe it refers to buildings too,
I would, yeah, nothing in there precludes any sort of
Okay.
built item.
But it seems to contradict a few things, actually. One, if you read what general buildings, it actually says in the code, it says general buildings are intended to be built close to the front and corner property lines. So we're conflicting with that. It might even conflict with the actual footage that they give, because they aren't minimums, but they're minimums and maximums.
Right, there's zones within
Right,
the,
and
exactly,
so
yes,
it
I
actually
understand.
forces out of the maximum on one of them. We looked at it. I think, isn't one of them 0 to 10 feet or something like that?
Yeah.
And so it pushes out of that 10 foot, which would be, so we gotta look for variance for one or the other. We're breaking one of the rules. If we can't follow both, let's put it that way.
Yeah. And we're dealing with just the ground floor, right? So I mean, the idea is sort of if the lobby sort of somehow
The first
sort of gets sort of haunched and gives herself a covering. I mean,
So
we have tricks, right?
it would, I don't know how great the building would look if we did that. So again, based on what you're bringing up, then that would be another variance that we
I
possibly.
think it becomes a conversation. I mean, as this moves
Right.
forward and how all of these things get.
Because, and we can draw it up, because Greg actually did that for me, and I didn't bring it, but to his point, obviously the visibility triangles for pedestrians, for bikes, for cars. If we draw that pedestrian, when he drew that up there, you have, if cars park where they are parking spots there on Park, our visibility triangle is so far back from those cars that you have to stop 2-3 times to get past to see those other cars. So the bigger concern would not be our building by any means. There's parking spots that are gonna be much bigger concern.
I mean, it helps that it's an obtuse angle too, right on that corner. I mean, there's just lots of things that are sort of part and parcel to why it might not be as big of an issue, but it's
Right.
still something that
Okay,
we have to sort of at least
address.
check off the box and how we
Okay.
deal with.
Good point, and thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah. And to kind of answer another point, so the DMX districts are fairly new. Some of the code that there may be conflicts that need to be fixed. The ordinance is fairly new. That is something that's worth considering, like how do the site triangles affect MX districts? This may be a place where a variation works if you can't get it to work, or if it works better with something that is inside that site triangle at this intersection.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about it, for this particular paragraph that we pulled up, section 9.3, it's specifically calling off Cs and the MX 1s, 2s, and 3s, right? And then within the MX, we have the Ts and the Rs, which are sort of the next level down below the MX 1, 2, and 3. Maybe the T needs to sort of slide into this exception if the Ts are supposed to be closer to the street. Rs are pulling back a little bit more. Those zones at the setbacks, and those build to zones are a little deeper because we're more residential feel, right? That's the essence of the MXRs because of their direct adjacency.
Yeah, so those, the other MX districts are accepted.
Those are, yeah, exactly.
Okay.
It says the zoning districts in C1, C2, MX1, MX2, and MX3. So those are accepted out.
So we
So
may
we don't
need
have to
to,
worry about site triangle issues because, again, we're trying to define our street edges.
yeah, so we may need to examine whether or not those other MX districts should be accepted as well,
Yeah.
or whether they're fine. This one seems to point to the fact that the MXT
Might want to sort of slip into the
might want to
exception.
slip in. Okay. All right, questions, comments?
I have one. Code precludes type 5 construction for buildings at 3 stories.
That's building code, correct?
Building code,
Yes.
correct, yeah. How are you proposing to address that issue?
We are planning this building at the moment to be a type 3B,
Okay.
which allows, the ground floor would be essentially a type 1 building. It would be block, precast, cap, podium style,
Yep.
instead of covered parking and get that separation. The building up from there would be fiber retardant lumber, which is allowed for the exterior walls, I think type 3B. The interior of the building is allowed for the interior.
Whatever you want, yeah. Mhm.
So that's the intention.
Okay.
Could we go to the slide of the first floor, the parking garage plan? Start. So is there an entrance to the lobby, the northwest corner from within the parking garage? Am I seeing that right?
Yes.
All right, so then, I guess I'm trying to wrap my mind around the rationale to have the entrance to the lobby off Park, because it said somewhere being close to the parking. Are you talking about just street parking?
Right, no,
Or
the exterior parking.
Because somebody.
All around
parks
back?
In the exterior is gonna walk up Princeton, so that was, I mean, we are talking about only a matter of steps, obviously. We felt that on the Princeton side of the corner, it made sense, just because it gave people a little bit less of a trip distance to walk, from that exterior parking. Obviously, from the interior, they can make a direct entrance into the lobby.
Okay. Right, 6 1, half dozen the other, truthfully, but, and so, from the lobby, you can get into, I see the first floor apartment, right? And there's 2 on the first floor, 2 units?
So, the intention that the ground floor apartments would actually have access privately off of Park.
Okay,
And they would also have their own private entrances into the garage, for their own parking spaces, so essentially the lobby just wouldn't even be used by them. They could have mailboxes of their own, essentially a bit of a townhome style living inside of almost a bit.
okay. Yeah, as I was trying to just figure out how you got the other unit, I was, okay. And what's your thought, I mean, the parking variance, that's kind of where I come back to, because, it doesn't, to me, there's feasibility to find more parking spots if you don't have those units on the first floor. And so I struggle with the need for the variance on that. I mean, should those spots be needed, this is where you run into the hiccup, right? Because you can't park on a street overnight, so what happens?
Well, to your point about the ground floor units and being able to get more parking, you'd be surprised how much more space you need to actually, we can't add another row of parking, you know, we have aisleways, standard, you know, turning radiuses.
Sure.
We really, it'd be surprising if we gain one or two by doing that.
Yeah, I mean, sitting here, it's hard, you know, mentally can't really
no,
reconfigure it, but
absolutely. I play that, you know, gymnastics game with these a lot, but I mean, and to your point, I mean, again, with the traffic assessment, it really has been shown on average that a car per bedroom isn't really happening in a majority of units, and that's where the assessment is coming in, figuring 25 to 31, which is a little bit less than what we're providing.
yeah. I mean, and truthfully, I 100% believe that estimate, but we have to play the what-if scenario, and so, you know, we want to create a situation where even if it's guests, if it's that teenage kid that has an extra car, you know, now they're playing with the parking lot right next door, and they're, you know, so I struggle, to be honest with you. Like, that variance is going to be hard for me to swallow.
A couple of things I would say to that is that in some communities, one parking space per unit is not unusual. That's sort of becoming more common. But then less to that is the last thing I would want to see in a development on Park is a parking garage along Park. Because to be honest, I already struggle with the idea of residential on the ground floor in this particular location, because while residential does add some life to the street, it's obviously not the same as a commercial use. Blinds will be drawn. It's just the reality. But at least you have some sense of transparency. You'll have light from behind windows at night. You will have people coming in and out of their doors, hopefully. Amazon packages on the front step. But
Something like that.
if you've walked down residential podium buildings anywhere that have podiums on the street side, you either have fake windows, solid CMU walls, or louvered vents. I mean, that's pretty much all you get. And even in this particular plan, which I think is fairly good, other than some nits I could pick, if you look at the west side of the building, the west elevation, see where the parking garage is, transfer that onto Park, where you have
Huge.
solid walls with a garage door or two. I mean, it's not good.
No.
It's not good.
And that was exactly our thought, and maybe if I pull up the front elevation. To Jason's point, when you see these buildings that are all parking on the first floor, yeah, they put in fake windows, but it tends to look just like that, where we think this is much more, I don't know, residential, if you will, where you do have residential on the first floor and you have the regular sized windows that you might see. Again, I think that's easier to swallow than a parking garage. Even when they try to hide it, it never really gets hidden that well.
Yeah, I mean, just look at your lower right elevation. Now imagine that all along Park versus what's there now. I mean, you're going to have a man door or two, and then everything else is going to be fake transparency.
Yeah.
There's other options too. If you eliminate those spots, not spots, but the tenant units, not necessarily parking garage, but by eliminating them as living spaces, you cut down the necessity of parking spots. If they turn into well, I don't know, you know, in apartments, buildings,
Yeah.
game rooms, whatever the heck
Yeah.
they do. I mean, that takes care of an issue as well.
What's the issue then?
The variance, for the variance of parking. So if you have less units, you need less spaces, so if it cuts down to, maybe it's only, whatever the calculation is on this, off the top of my head, I don't remember.
Comment on that. So, obviously, there are a lot of developments, a couple, I think, going up in Villa Park, where they have all those amenities, right? They have the game room, they have the theater room, they have the dog washing, and all the other amenities come with it. But if you look at their rents, they're gonna be much, much higher than ours, because obviously, that square footage has to be paid for by the tenant. And so this is kind of our niche. We're not doing the 5, 6, 7 stories, 50 to 100 units with all the amenities, and the rents per square foot are 20% more. We're actually trying to bring the rents down, because a lot of people don't need that workout gym, or that pool, or that rec room that they don't use, and they don't want to pay for it. So we found that there's a niche in this, because again, all this new housing that's coming out that's apartment based, it's really expensive, if you look at the rents. And why? Part of the reason, they have to pay for those rec rooms that sit most of the time unused. So again, this helps us bring the rent costs down too, by not having those spaces that, again, we find aren't used at all. Or at least there's tenants who don't want to use them, don't want to pay for them.
Sure.
Let's put it that way.
All right. Other questions, comments, thoughts? 'Cause I have some.
What's the back elevation look like?
It's unsimilar to the front elevation. It has some balcony niches, recesses. The only difference is obviously the ground floor is pretty much a blank wall on the alley, because it's parking and parking right up against it. But it is actually very much like the upper floors of the front facade, with balconies and a series of windows. There are 4 units on every floor, basically that.
What, any plans on what you're gonna, if any of the utilities that are gonna be changed? There's some pretty heavy utility lines that are right in the alleyway of that.
We wouldn't be touching those, no.
Okay. So basically you're back,
Are you talking about the 2 utility poles?
Yeah.
Yeah, we wouldn't be touching those. We laid out the parking, and this was actually brought up by Public Works and Engineering. We laid out the parking so that we wouldn't be touching them.
Yeah, looking at the plans, it looks like there's 3 balconies along the back, 2 near the center and 1 at the southeast corner. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 windows on all of the upper floors along the back. Plus windows on the balcony, so that's an extra 2 windows. Or I guess, yeah, windows and doors. All right. The 2 bedrooms that you've got on the ground floor, are those single or double rooms?
Those are 2-bedroom units.
2 beds. Okay, so 2. Got the plan here that says that it's 10 1-bedroom units and 14 2-bedroom units, but I think based upon the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th floor plans, we're at 12 1-bedrooms. So can you just list off the most current version of the number of 1-bedrooms versus 2-bedrooms that you have?
I believe it is it's 10, 1, and 14, 2, because the top floor is 4 2-bedrooms and 2 1-bedrooms.
Oh, so on your plan you just reversed it.
I believe.
Did we make a mistake?
Yeah, you're,
I just want to make sure I have the count right.
It's
We definitely have the count right, total.
10 1-bedrooms, 14
yeah,
2-bedrooms.
should be 4, 2, and
Yeah, I
2,
think
1.
they're.
Okay, so those are just reversed. Okay.
Yeah.
Appreciate the clarification.
That's right.
Okay, so then basically our code, from what I inferred from the initial plan, was that we require 1 parking space per bedroom.
Correct.
Correct. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so with regards to the site plan that shows the alleyway parking. Yeah. Okay, so let's just talk about that for a second. Where is your? Where do you propose that the entire building's trash receptacle is going to be located?
So looking at it on the right side,
Yep.
You'll see two doors kind of swinging open.
Do you have a cursor on that? I don't know if you can.
I don't.
It's at
unless-
the,
if I
it's
ass-
at the upper, it's at the right
Right
end
here.
of the drive.
It's right
aisle.
there.
Yeah, right here.
Okay, so it looks like if you go to the, let's call it the southeast corner of just where your lot line ends, it looks like, is that 6 feet or is that 8 feet of a space between the last parking spot and the true edge of your property?
It's 6 feet.
Is that going to be that's enough for the waste hauler to get in and out?
No, we'd be rolling the dumpster out
To the alley.
to the alley.
You've got to roll it out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is common, which,
Okay.
happens all the time. No, he would not be
A lot of
pulling.
times it's
That's-
either rolled out of the garage through the overhead door, but
Right.
in this instance,
Okay,
it
just
worked well to have it off the
Want to
fence.
make sure because
Right.
that looked awfully thin
Yeah,
for.
no, not
No, good point.
anticipating
Definitely
driving a
not.
truck if-
Yeah.
or anything.
Okay.
Never fit there.
All right. Guess just a hazard concern pops in my head of having the 11th eastmost parking space there with the rollout dumpster and the waste hauler, the refuse hauler there. I guess that's just my own concern for the 11th parking spot.
Well,
whoever-
And we'd be providing bollards in
Okay.
that area, protect
Right.
that.
Probably a
Well,
real solid idea. The alleyway though is not one way only, correct?
Correct.
No.
I have a little bit of an issue with that, with the diagonal parking and the safety hazard. And obviously, it sounds like you guys talked to traffic and safety about this already. But as it is a, dual direction alley, and it's not a huge alley. It can be somewhat tight, especially with 11 parking spots with the angles that you're going to have to serve with the ingress and egress. If you don't mind me asking, was that discussed by traffic and safety about the alleyway access points?
Was it discussed? I mean, we brought up and we talked about it, but they were supportive of this idea, yes.
And the reasoning behind the angle is because of the narrowness of the alley. A perpendicular spot would be more difficult to turn into and back out of.
I agree.
Than
100%.
an angle. So while the alley is not one way, at least the residents of this building understand once they move in how they need to use the alley. That would be their use of the alley. We're not mandating that the rest of the people who use the alley use it that way. Obviously, with the narrowness of the alley, and it is considered a two-way alley, there are other apartment buildings that park off of it and manage the congestion as it has to be, but we felt that this managed it, that at least our directional residents are going one way and they're not going to be forced into somebody leaving and coming at the same time and needing to maneuver around each other.
As for the, let's just call it the differences of opinion at the moment on A9, administrative adjustment, variance, or text amendment. Ellen, is that something that you and your staff might be prepared to issue a memo on at the next meeting or by the next meeting to kind of just go over your opinions of what the true black letter of the text would allow versus what they're seeking?
Hello. Is this on? Yes, no? I think it is, because you know what, he did a sound check.
He did it?
So
Okay.
we should be okay. My read of the code is that an administrative adjustment is not the way to go, that it would have to be a variance. But if we're looking at a PUD, it could be rolled into the variances for the PUD. Mr. Chairman, did you want to hear any of my thoughts on this, on the project? I know it's a
Yeah,
concept plan. I would like to point out that.
One quick thought on
Yeah.
the variation before, and then you're free to discuss as you want. My thought on this would be that if you're already seeking a series of variations, or if this gets turned into a PD, whichever way you go, I would just seek a variation for the driveway access. You may be able, that's, you're already seeking relief, so that's probably how I would interpret it. Obviously, community development director is the zoning administrator, so they have the final call on that. But that's my thought on that. And it seems to make sense in this case. But I do have some thoughts on the driveway when we get back to that. But yes,
For the driveway access or the garage access?
the garage access, the driveway that accesses the garage. That's so.
So the driveway access, not the garage access? Which would, say it one more time, sorry.
The access to the garage
Right.
via the driveway from Princeton, I would say you're already getting variations. Just approach that as a variation.
Okay.
That's how I would.
Both of them, the garage access and the driveway access, because there's two.
What is the garage access?
There's, they're two separate things.
Right, that's
Right.
Even though that one accesses the other.
right, it's hard to have one without the other.
Yeah,
That's why we were a little confused about that.
Well, you could have a driveway access that accesses a on-grade
Exterior.
lot, right? I mean, so that would be one way. So in the instance with the garage, you are forced to have both, right? Because it's,
Okay.
but you could have a driveway to an on-grade parking. I mean, that would be that permitted driveway access.
That's absolutely the reason.
That's the reason for the separation.
Just couldn't really have
It,
that property
it makes no,
inside.
it doesn't apply here, yeah. Well, they both apply here.
yeah. If there's a conflict there, I would say approach that as a variation, but I don't think you need to approach that as two variations.
No.
I mean, it's a single variation for a driveway at that location.
Okay.
That's how I would suggest approaching it. I mean, Ellen is more familiar with the ordinance, or at this point, probably on this particular project than I am, but,
And just to comment on the PUD versus variance, when we first met with Patrick Consuelo definitely said we should do a PUD. And so we were on board, and I think we were, that then when we met with Ellen, she thought, no, maybe we should go for variances. So, and again, we're open to either avenue, whichever you think is better, or the path of least resistance, again, part of the reason why we're here.
yeah, and so regarding the PUD versus seeking some variations, as far as I'm aware, this may be the first development in an MX district in the village. So
In MXT, we had
MXT,
MX3.
I don't know if we have-
We
I
had
mean, I guess-
MX3 last week, last month.
Last month.
oh yeah, you're right. That was
the
yeah.
drive-through on.
That was the
Charles.
the actual first one, yeah. But yeah, I'm. If we can get there without a planned development, that's okay. If that makes more sense to you, from depending on how many variations you ultimately need to seek, and the fees that may go along with that. But I believe what you'll be required to submit as part of your package for the plan development might offset that. So the fees I'm not up on. That's not, that's an administrative thing, but, okay, sorry, Ellen, go ahead.
No, that's fine. Staff did look at this. We did have a staff meeting. The PUD process is four-point. You have a meeting with development staff. Craig has had several, thank you. You have a concept plan review, which can be optional. And then the next step would be a public hearing for the PUD site plan. And then as they move closer towards development, staff has administrative ability to make minor changes. Minor versus major is laid out in the code. So we're at the concept plan. What I was hoping to receive from the commission tonight was input on the zoning district, and there's some slight variations if it were to step to an RX2, but it is zoned MXT, and what he's brought in does meet MXT. The parking variations are the one thing that would lead it to downstep in district, because there's no density maximums in this code. The density is set in the MX districts is set by parking and height. So just to be aware, you've got your traditional zones, and this is new for you for everybody with the form-based code. And then the facade, if we're good with the wall on Princeton, the color, the feel, the materials. So I was hoping for your confirmation on district parking variations and the facade. The concerns that staff had, we did bring up the trash locations, and we're concerned if somebody parks or if it's windy, that easternmost space could be problematic for getting the dumpster out. Their solution is to put the bollards in. And we understand that he wants to put the trash there because it's a drop down and it works in the building. It's how the internal systems of the building are going to work. We were concerned about the alley width because for the cars that are parked there, because you're going to have to walk to the alley to get around to the front. And you had indicated that you would move the building up a little bit. I don't know if that happened in your site plan.
No, we
But-
haven't touched anything
Yeah.
since we've met.
We're concerned about the poles and possibly those poles, the electric needs to be buried. Because we are concerned that there's going to be just, you're jamming it in and you've got to park between those poles. So if for the length of the block, the electric, and I don't know what the cost would be, that's something to look into. Okay. We did reference the site triangle and had the discussion about whether it applied or not, and I figured I'd wait till I saw where the final building laid out. Okay. And some of these variances are very justified. He's got to put the parking under the building. It's got to be a certain space length with a turn aisle. You know, I was sitting there like, can you turn the building this way? It just doesn't work. This is the best way for the building to go with the parking from east to west. And back to the administrative adjustment on the parking, the code is just very clear in the district. It says that wherever an alley exists, the entrance should be from the alley. So, so those are my thoughts, and if you would just make sure that in your wrap-up comments, you let staff know where you'd like to be, specifically on the parking variations and the facade, because it does meet the what he's proposed does meet the MXT district.
Right.
Except that there are variations needed. And as to a PUD versus going with the variations, a PUD is a special use for plan unit development with variations. That's the whole point of it. There's always a variation, and in return, there's to be public benefit, and that's why the municipality is willing to provide the PUD. It can't be used just as a means for density, for increased density, and that's very clearly laid out in the code. Okay.
Can I ask a clarifier?
Yeah.
On this? Okay, so for A9, which is the driveway access, I got the code pulled up right now. Am I correct in my reading, in my interpretation, that the issue with A9 is the placement of the driveway access because for this current property plan, there is an alley. And because the alley exists and the driveway, the requested or proposed driveway access is off of the non-primary street, meaning Princeton, the need for a variance is indicated. Versus administrative adjustment, because my interpretation is that because there is an alley, an administrative adjustment is off the table.
It's not an option, yeah.
Okay.
And I will say, the public works staff looked at whether the parking should angle the other way, and that doesn't work. You just lose too many spaces. It would have been preferable for the one-way to be coming out to the alley, out to the street, so that nobody is backing into the street. The other thing that we did look at is where the garage will line up against the homes to the west, and we're not totally certain. So, but just trying to think of how it fits in with the neighbors. But I will say that Ross Builders has a great reputation, and I think they'll bring us a quality project. So, okay.
I just also want to congratulate you guys on finding a property that's already got an NFR with the removed tanks. Sometimes that can be a needle in the haystack, so good catch.
Jason, I just had a couple comments or questions.
Sure.
First of all, just as a point of disclosure and transparency, I live in this neighborhood, and I'm a Prairie Path homeowner. But I did have a question. I know this isn't a public hearing, but was there notification to the neighborhood about this meeting tonight besides just our website?
That's not
but there was no other communication to the neighbors or anything. And I also went back and I looked at the comprehensive plan, and this particular area is not really addressed very well at all, but it certainly isn't addressed for a 4-story apartment building. The Prairie Path is one of the most unique things about Villa Park. It's a 1.3-mile green belt that runs right through the center of town. And I wouldn't be supportive of text amendments or variances without a lot of community input on this. That's all.
Okay, thank you. All right. Other questions, comments before?
So I've got a question for Mr. Chairman. With your thought that there's a potentiality of kind of merging a single variance request or crafting a single variance request for the variances for A9 and A10, I am on board with the variance for A9 if that's how the potential petitioner wishes to pursue, and sorry for the alliteration on that. For A10, I read it as an administrative adjustment, but I guess my question is for the chair and possibly for staff to think about prior to receiving the petition is whether or not we can merge essentially 2 requests into the same variance, because I thought a variance would be by the section of the code itself and subsection A9 versus A10. Because if A10 potentially only requires an administrative adjustment, obviously that's a path of less resistance than a variance on that. So, my reading is probably at least 2 variances for the parking and for A9 for the driveway access. I think it's only up to the property owner petitioner to indicate to us whether or not they wish to proceed with multiple variances or just wrap it up into one PUD. So I guess just the clarifier is, would it be allowable to kind of wrap A9 and A10 into the same variance? Or do we just kind of put A9 as the variance and A10 as an administrative adjustment?
Yeah, and that may be a question for legal. I honestly don't know the best path on that. But that's what I would suggest, because the one seems fairly clear that it's a variation, the other is an administrative adjustment. I mean, if they could be combined into one action, that's the most streamlined way to do it.
I agree.
The other way to approach it obviously would be to have a if you have a variation, staff could then make the administrative adjustment as you said, and in some hypothetical world where staff does not issue that administrative adjustment, there's an appeals process that brings it back to us for review. I believe that's the case. So it seems like if the variation is approved, then basically if the driveway is okay there with us, there's a way to get there. But it's probably best to have legal's interpretation of that before proceeding, for sure. So generally speaking, don't have an issue with the driveway on Princeton. The driveway would not work off the alley for a number of reasons. I mean, you lose a number of parking spaces. The parking would become difficult to maneuver. just doesn't lay out, and I certainly wouldn't want to see the driveway on Park. What I would ask is to look very carefully about where that driveway falls in relation to the houses on the other side of the street. The angles of that driveway, perhaps, I don't know if it's possible to change it a little bit if necessary, but to avoid potential headlights on the house across the street relation to where windows are on that house, or and I would say bring that when you come back to us with that plan, it'd be good to be able to see those houses and the driveways across the street on the site plan, because that's kind of a critical part of where that driveway location is. I know you're somewhat limited in the location and angles and all of that, but being able to see that exactly would be useful. Generally speaking, I don't have a problem with the parking along the alley. I know that there are some concerns about the utilities. Get that addressed with staff and Public Works, and make sure all of that works. From an overall design standpoint, one place I do struggle, I mentioned it earlier, is that I would like to see more done to address Park, whether that's adding a door to your lobby off of Park, whether that's bringing that other residential door that's currently in the northeast corner around to Park, so that even though Park is not a commercial street, or this would not be a commercial block of Park, it still has that rhythm with punched openings, doors, as opposed to being one door and a bunch of windows. That's clearly residential, but to give that a little more rhythm. Honestly, I'm even okay if some of that comes up all the way to Park, but I know that's another variation, so.
Yeah, like we have to sort of respect the district, right? I mean, then we're doing a
Yeah.
PPD.
Yeah, no, I understand. Because that's always the problem with any type of transitional building or transitional zoning district, right? You're trying to
Exactly.
find that fit between, in this case, commercial immediately to the east and single-family residential to the west, and how do you get there in a way that is actually a transition? I know there was some any way to visually break up that long western wall, especially at the ground level, where you've got currently have, even if it's just in materials, where you have, I kind of feel the same about the east wall too, but
So, as we mentioned further down, at least in the PowerPoint, Ellen brought up, a great point that we don't have all the transparency and we have too much blank wall. So we haven't touched this since we met with Ellen, just because we didn't want to put more time into something if we're going down the wrong path.
Right.
So we plan on doing that anyway, as far as adding some transparency, more transparency to it. Again, this is 2D, so you can't appreciate all the different depth that we have going on. Obviously, we can come up with a 3D at some point, so you can better appreciate that.
yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, to that point, I think that sawtooth effect that's happening on that west elevation is a whole lot better than what's happening in the park with sort of the wall, right? I mean,
Correct.
now you have this sort of spots for landscaping at the sidewalk level. I mean, if you're a pedestrian walking on that, it's better than, a sheer wall. Out of curiosity, speaking of that elevation, would the 12-foot back set be a requirement there as well with the 12-foot back set at the, above the third floor? Or is it just on Park? It should be on both street faces I don't think there's a differentiation. I think
I read somewhere that it's the primary street,
is it just the primary street?
and I can look. for
Yeah,
that.
we could check that, yeah.
I'm
Because that starts to chop up that
Yeah.
fourth floor.
almost positive it's the primary street.
Yeah.
It wasn't anywhere in the table. It was somewhere else that I read it.
Okay.
I'll find it and I'll send it to you. Thanks.
Because the point 12 just makes reference to stories above the third floor shall be stepped back a minimum of 12 feet from the front facade, so I guess it's the.
So front
we're
facade.
determining that to be the front.
Maybe that was what it was, front facade.
Yeah. Because the other is a front build-to zone and the other is the corner
Right.
build-to zone, so
Yeah.
it's not the.
It's not the
corner
front.
facade. Yeah.
Yeah, so regarding that Park and Princeton corner, the lobby that I talked about earlier, and I said the same thing to Garden Station, is just, address that corner as a corner and
Not a
any
problem.
way you can.
Not a problem.
And, yeah,
We assumed we'd be doing that.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm just sort of thinking about that entrance for the drive into the parking and hearing the residents' sort of comments and thinking about sort of the life of sort of access and in and out of this thing and the point of, and I don't want to, is there any merit to sort of limiting turning left out of there, and how do you do it? To sort of limit that access to the neighborhood and to the south and sort of push people to park and to get where they need to go.
I mean, I kind of thought the same thing as well and figured if that was something, a point of discussion, I mean, I don't think it would be an issue. I mean,
Turning right or left?
Turning-
Traffic only to Park Boulevard.
So turning
it's
right
something-
only.
Coming out.
Coming out and turning
If
right.
it was coming out.
We would, I
think
don't,
most people would be going that direction.
right. I don't
potentially
think we would,
anyway, and I don't-
we'd have to think about it. I don't think we'd oppose that.
Yeah.
That we've got a right turn only coming
That,
out.
that could actually address a number of issues. If it was right turn, left turn in, right turn out,
Right. Correct. I should say.
only to the degree that you could ever regulate that.
Sure.
But driveway shapes certainly
Right.
push
Yeah.
that.
They help.
That
Yeah,
Right.
that
exactly.
does that accomplishes a couple things, right? It keeps traffic hopefully from going south on Princeton, but it also puts headlights going.
Hopefully
Off of
quicker
Christine's house,
opportunity
yes.
to
Yes.
turn and not sitting there with headlights directly
Yes,
as well.
they're turned more towards the northwest as opposed to straight west. I would suggest that might be something good to look into. That's a good thought, Eric. Thoughts on materials? You're the materials guy, Eric.
I am. I had no idea. I had no idea that I'm the material guy.
And just to comment on the materials a little bit, we're actually feeding off of the standard metery a little bit. They have black brick and they have some brown composite siding. So we were feeding off, we don't have to do that. I mean, those don't have to be the colors. But we kind of like that they had that.
And
We
it
do
works.
like black, and as you saw in our other projects, we've been doing black and variations of gray and white. So it seemed to be on point with trend and what's going on, and we've never done brown before, but we added the brown just because the metery had some brown.
No, I mean, nothing jumped out at me,
Yeah, I mean,
in a
and just
negative
to
way.
add to Craig's point, I think we were trying to be, again, kind of respectful to that transitional idea with single-family homes that are primarily sided, This gives you kind of that combination, and again, playing off of a nice new business that is in the area, kind of
Right.
was the thought behind it.
It's remote access garage.
Yes.
Yeah, not
Or
open.
it might be a sensor.
Sensor. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just not gonna be open.
No,
Oh.
no, definitely not. It'd be heated.
Yeah, I think I see that on the. Am I looking at it correctly? Is the right elevation that kind of that midpoint? Is that the garage?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's black also, so you can't see it well on this. And that's where we would be adding some windows to it too.
Yeah. I'd encourage you to work with staff and the our police department to ensure safety standards with regards to the ingress egress doors for the tenants on the ground floor.
Mm-hmm.
Not the lobby itself, just like the actual particular units that you were thinking of exiting out to park,
Mhm.
I believe.
Right.
What's your concern?
Concern is just that, based upon potential lighting issues and the fact that somebody's just going to have a door possibly without, camera or any window right next to that particular door if somebody's exiting out, potential safety concerning. It's already a darker building. Just if they're exiting, don't want an unfortunate surprise. For a tenant exiting out, not through the lobby, which is going to be a lit area versus just an actual door from the unit itself.
We would have a coach light at each entrance. I mean, by code, I think you have to have one, right?
Certainly, I mean, in both particular, whether we change the unit to the east face park, the entrance, as was suggested, is something we could look at and do. I think with both recesses, we'd be making those recesses large enough to also be a small outdoor space. These units don't have balconies, so most likely, a black metal fence, something around those units with a gate and then a light, and, again, safety reasons, because absolutely what you're saying is very valid, that they have a unique feature, as opposed to the units that are interior.
Appreciate it.
So you've got me looking, is it directly under the sidewalk? I thought there was landscaping as
No,
well.
There is.
There's more than 8 feet from the side, edge of the sidewalk to
One, yeah, and one thing that's a little bit deceptive is that, let me look at the site plan to verify what I'm about to say. What did I do with that? So, their building is set back off of the property line, but our sidewalk is also set back, for lack of a better term, to the north from the property line
A few feet.
currently. So whatever space they're giving between the building edge and the property line, there's actually more potential green space, is what, I mean, if they're proposing landscaping, between the property line and the sidewalk. It's kind of hard to see, but you can see where there's the gap between the hash and the property line on the sidewalk. I noticed that when I was looking at it. Currently, it's paved all the way to the sidewalk, but the sidewalk's not actually at the property line. It's off the property line to the north.
Yeah, it looks like there's an extra foot or
Yeah.
so.
At least.
Yeah, I think it may be closer to 2.
2 feet, okay. Yeah, and it looks like the same to the property just to its northeast as well.
Yeah,
That-
and
that's- that
it's
same
actually
line just tracks it.
it's actually the same on the west property line as well. So the current property, the current parking lot there that's like asphalted sidewalk to sidewalk is technically about 2 feet over the property line on both sides, on the north and the west. Which is probably in that instance a good thing, because it would probably be a dirt pile.
A weed bed, yeah.
Yeah. I know there was, I think there was a question at some point from Alan whether MXT or MXR of some sort would work better for this project, and I think MXT is what it wants to be, because the MXR essentially requires the building to be farther off of Park
And Princeton.
and Princeton, and you know, maybe being a little farther off Princeton isn't a big deal, but setting it back farther off of Park, in my opinion, is not the right thing for this location. If it was on the opposite corner across the street, if it was the southwest corner, then maybe that's what you want, but you get a more residential transition instead of a transitional transition, for lack of a better way of explaining it. Any other questions, comments, thoughts?
Just out of curiosity, what's the plan for snow removal for those outside spots? I could see that being a bear in the alley. And
We have this situation in other places, and obviously we'd hire a professional company that would have to take care of it. Yeah.
I feel like it'd be a back and forth, right, between the alley getting plowed into the spots.
It does happen. It does happen. You're right. And then, you know, everyone along that alley's got that same issue. So yeah, it always is an issue. And even, you know, your driveway too, right? You know, you plow it and then the snow plow comes by and then you got to do it again.
30 seconds later,
Right,
exactly.
usually.
Murphy's Law. Every time.
Usually.
But Ellen, is there anything specific that you need to know from us that you don't feel like you already know? Okay. Questions, comments, anything where you think we could, where our points weren't clear to you, or we could provide more guidance for the applicant, or any closing comments, either or?
I think we're pretty good. Let me just try to summarize. As far as, well, it sounds like variances would be the better route or preferred route than PUD. With the variances, I think I've counted 3. The parking, 5 parking spots, the visibility triangle, and A9, the driveway access. And then we'd have to get clarification from legal on A10 on the garage access. Do we get an administrative adjustment? Do we package that with the variance? Does that sound right?
Yeah, that sounds right from the zoning standpoint. Now, I will clarify that we are not the arbiter of
Right.
what variations are required. That is staff. So that sounds right, but they will be the ones who review the plans and
Right.
make that ultimate determination if there are other variations. That assumes that you take closer looks at the transparency and the blank wall clauses.
The entrance.
And there are other design standards, for lack of a better terms, in there in terms of the types of lighting that you should be used and things like that. Make sure that you're looking at those, because we really want this to be. This is not the first MX. I forgot about the one on St. Charles, but that's a 2,000 square foot drive-through at a corner on St. Charles. This is a major project at a major intersection. A major vista in our village. So, to the degree that you can hit all those standards, that would be ideal.
Got it.
Okay, so no other questions, comments, generally? Okay.
And Larry had mentioned community input. We weren't aware that, we just thought this was an informal meeting is what we were told, so we didn't even know that the public would be here. By all means, we love hearing their feedback, but before we presented anything to the public, we wanted to get, we want to know what direction. We didn't want to show them something and then say, hey, this is what we're looking to do, and then we find out we can't do it or we got to change it and then go back to them. So by all means, we plan on presenting it more to the community, meeting with them face-to-face, going door-to-door, whatever it takes to show them our ideas, see what input they have, see what can be addressed, what can't be addressed. But we, again, we just thought this was just something informal, just to get some ideas on what direction we need to go do next.
Yeah, and while that level of engagement is not required. It's always appreciated.
Definitely.
And it could go a long way towards allaying neighbors' concerns. And sometimes they've got some really good design ideas
Yeah.
that we didn't have.
Agreed.
So if you have an opportunity to do something like that, I would highly recommend it. And then, of course, the public hearing before us will be noticed. So anybody that's living nearby will receive notice of that. And then you'll have a chance to review whatever comes before us again, give specific comments on that. And then we're a recommending body, so our recommendation, whether it's in favor or against, goes to the village board, and they make the final decision. So actually, along the way, you'll have formally at least 2 or 3 opportunities, depending on how the village board processes it, to give public comment. Those are not noticed in the same way. The village board meetings aren't, but agendas are published in advance. So ours will be formally noticed to the neighbors. Okay, I believe that is all on that agenda item. All right, so, yes, thank you.
Thank you.
So we have other business, public comments on non-agenda items. Do we want to discuss potential goals, or do you, like, as a commission going forward? Or do I just plant that seed and we talk about that at the next meeting or the next time when we have more than
Potential what?
goals?
Oh, potential.
Kind of a goal setting. When I first came on the commission, that was something that Shubra, who was the community development director at the time, pushed us to do. A few good things came from that. Maybe tonight's not the night, since I'm springing it on people. But it is something I'd like to talk about. Like, what are some things that we can accomplish, whether it's looking at areas of the comprehensive plan that need to be updated, whether it's looking at other potential text amendments that need to be addressed. As an example, the issue with site triangles and MXT that came up today. Are there holes in our ordinance that could be fixed? And by holes, I don't mean necessarily loopholes, but things that should be addressed village-wide that have never been addressed by code. The big example is that when I joined in 2008, we didn't have a landscape ordinance or a lighting ordinance. And all of that relied on the nuisance standards, and which didn't address landscaping at all. Just how you wound up with the Jewel parking lot and the North Park Mall parking lot. We've been able to clean a lot of that up over the. But are there issues like that, or other things that might be potentially coming to our village in a positive way or problematic way that we need to address? I don't necessarily have anything specific tonight, but ways to be proactive instead of reactive, like yeah.
Actually, tonight was an exam, because this is the first of the MX, these last 2 meetings that we've had, so
Yeah.
that we can see what
What it really wants to be.
Right,
Yeah,
what it really wants to
how
be and
really the
feel like.
mechanism-
Yeah.
and maybe address some of that to
Yeah.
see how we can make it, well, it's something new for us.
It seems like there might be a potential conflict with the MX districts and the site triangles,
Right.
and wanting to
And
address
that's
the
just one
corner.
little thing.
That's a little
Yeah.
thing, but something to look at.
And that is one that I spent about an hour and a half over there the other day just looking at, because of such a huge gap from corner to corner, the setback is really funky there.
Yeah. Yeah, and I said this back in, I don't remember, it was December or January, my mini State of the Union. we're frequently have been the zoning board of appeals and rarely the plan commission.
Sure.
Because we're rolled into one, so we get to address primarily text amendments and variations and the occasional special use. Very few plan developments until recently. So, you know, the comprehensive plan is
Well, this is one of those.
coming up on 15 years old.
Yeah,
now.
it is outdated, but this is one of those situations, I think, that we don't really have a plan for. And that particular area, Ardmore Park, is ripe for redevelopment. I'm not opposed to that, but I don't think we really have a really cohesive plan in terms of how we want it to look.
Right.
I'm very protective of the Prairie Path because it is the one thing that is uniquely Villa Park. No one else has that. And I think we should make a lot of effort to preserve and protect that and plan how we want it to look. Not just now, but, you know, for the next generation and years ahead.
No, and I would agree with that. And I think, generally speaking, the comprehensive plan speaks to that. It may not for the specific location that we're discussing tonight, and I
Yeah,
would be
it's very
hesitant.
brief.
And I would be hesitant to speak to that specific site very much because it will be before us again, and we're not in a public hearing.
It just briefly talked about Ardmore
Yeah.
and that particular intersection there.
But the reality is, when that comprehensive plan was drafted, what's currently happening on Villa Avenue was a pipe dream.
Oh, yeah.
What's happening at Garden Station now, hopefully, was a pipe dream. It was the introductions of the MX districts that the MX districts are supposed to protect that. We may find that we move forward that some of what was crafted, which was crafted by people who largely by consultants who took their time to go around the village and consult with the committee that was created for that, the zoning update committee. But we may find as we move forward that some of those standards are not what we want. Mm-hmm. That maybe 5 stories in some locations is too high, or 4, or but those are the kind of things that we can certainly, having a project like this before us, whether it ultimately gets approved or not, and that's why I don't want to discuss it because we're not in the public hearing, but that type of project gives us a chance to really look at it from both what do we want standpoint and a developer standpoint, what works, what doesn't, to have that give and take, and whether the project ultimately goes forward or not. We're learning a lot from this, because other than those meetings where we may have spent 3 hours going over 150 pages of text some nights, it's hard to wrap your head around what those numbers mean sometimes and what the phrases mean, and it's all there, and you think you know what it means, but when you start looking at it as holistically in a project, it becomes a completely different animal.
I think there's some commas to be added.
That will clarify things for you.
I would agree with you on that, and I was the comma police.
Okay.
I think our current president was on that committee, maybe around that.
Yes.
He was on or around that committee, and I certainly was the typo comma police on that. But it looks like I missed at least one.
Yeah, and my only comment on these MX districts, I'm poring over it. I've spent hours reading it, obviously, because I've never administered a form-based code before. I don't see much differentiation between some of the districts. And when it talks about 4.1.1, the districts, it references MX2A and MX2B. They're not discussed anywhere else. So there's the MX2. So I don't know. I don't think we need A and B, is all I'm saying. There's some things like that I think there were thoughts that didn't get fully flushed out.
And that could be. And I know that I think we have an MXR1 and I actually had to look
That's just the
hard
train
to
station.
find where the MXR1 is, and it's the area southeast of the train station along the south side of the tracks.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was the thing with the zoning map at the time was that because we were doing this comprehensive overhaul, there was not much political will to, and that's both both from the political side, the administrative side, and the consultant side, to lay a whole lot of districts on there that were vastly different than what was already on the ground. So other than some of the MX nodes, like on St. Charles, a lot of it was like the zoning map was almost keeping
What was there?
what was there, so we weren't creating nonconformities. There were a handful of places where I really pushed and said, this single corner lot, there's no way that should be C1. There's C3 on the other 90% of the block.
Okay.
Make the whole block C3. Let's do that. But for the most part, it was essentially an overlay, translation, for lack of a better word, of what was there. Some of the MX districts are not that, obviously, because they're more dense. But
I know this area that we were speaking of tonight was actually in the comprehensive plan and in our rezoning that was brought. We're not really sure what this district is. So, I mean, what does it want to be? That's what you look at is what do you want the district to be? We don't know what the district wants to be because it's unique to the village.
it is
Find something that fits though.
it is really that whole stretch between Princeton and Ardmore is a bit of a transition from the area of Ardmore that we think of, a park that we think of as Art Park and Ardmore, the stretch between Ardmore and East, the more or less dead corner at the southwest, now standard meadery, the funeral home parking lot, and this, which was a drive-through bank and a gas station before that. What is it? What does it want to be? And
It was always just the parking lot for the Summerfest.
yeah, as I say, it hasn't been a bank as long as I've lived here, I don't think, and I've been here since 2000.
2 days a year.
2 days a year it was
Busy.
just parking lot for Summerfest.
363, well, blink.
I will point out, Mr. Chairman, that on the agenda, I was going to update you on where I was with text amendments, so we're totally in our right to keep talking about this. So,
Yeah. And, yeah, so,
can I first thank you for all of your volunteer work? We truly appreciate you, and my thanks to Pat. She baked herself. Really appreciate that she did that.
Thanks, Pat.
thanks, Pat.
Thanks for answering me all the time. I like that.
One thing real quick, we talked about the site triangles and how these are coming up in the MX district, MX that we've had over the last two meetings. One other thing that has occurred in the last two meetings is talking about one-way exits. So that might also be something to discuss further if we're going through the comprehensive plan, or maybe making some text amendments thereon of, when possible, if conducive for the flow of traffic, requesting, if not requiring, one-way exits for the sake of either the flow of traffic or, as we saw today, making it easier on the adjacent homeowners.
Yeah, I think codifying that really becomes sort of the language.
I don't know that you need to codify it, you just make it a condition. And I would ask for an attorney's viewpoint on that, but you have the option to make it a condition as part of a site plan with the signage and everything.
Unless it's as of right, and then we don't.
Pardon?
Unless it's an as of right development, and then we don't.
Well, at that point, then okay. I
Yeah,
gotta
because
think
if we're
about that.
steering everything towards sort of aligning with the district, language, the MX sort of, as opposed to a PD,
That's what I'm saying.
Which
build-
seems like would be the route that we want to take because we went through this effort to develop this. Like, let's. Yeah, but how do you?
Well, I also
The
have to
nuances
look-
of how many layers to the onion is
It
there?
might not be in the zoning district, it might be in the streets and public right-of-ways chapter too.
Right.
So
And-
I've
Fair
got to look
point.
at that.
Very
Yeah,
fair point.
Yeah.
exactly. Well, that's what I mean. There may be a place for that, but how do you make it, if possible, is really hard to codify. You can create a standard that says it's not even technically a standard. It's
Sure.
a design recommendation, but those are essentially unenforceable. You can recommend them, but
I just foresee a lot of one-way exits becoming more popular given population trends and given traffic patterns.
yeah, and the St. Charles is like the prime example of what happens when curb cuts and road widenings go wrong, right? You have narrow sidewalks adjacent to 45-mile-an-hour traffic. It's not supposed to be 45 miles an hour, but it frequently is. Narrow sidewalks.
There's no parkway left.
There's no parkway left. And then we have curb cut upon curb cut upon curb cut in locations where shared curb cuts or single curb cuts or narrowed curb cuts are, even though St. Charles isn't currently walkable, they create a more pedestrian friendly feel because you're not crossing giant driveway after giant driveway after giant driveway. Like the north side of St. Charles between Ardmore and Villa is probably the worst example. Except for McDonald's. It's essentially all driveway curb cuts from McDonald's all the way west, almost. Except for where you've got a couple of buildings up to the street. But like where you have Taifu and there's 3 or 4 buildings right there together. There's not much we could do about that in retrospect. But keeping those things from happening and trying to repair the damage when we have the opportunity, whether it's a special use or a new development, is always ideal. And I've been involved with a number of projects in Chicago, and the current administration has put a lot of pressure on DPD to retroactively bring a lot of sites up to compliance that are 30, 40, 50 years old when they need zoning relief. We've always tried to do that. I think that's one of the things we've done well with some of the PDs like North Park Mall, getting them to add landscaping when by code they weren't required to, but it was a PD, so let's get some of that in there. And landscaping, and especially if you're not forcing them to add curbing, is usually a pretty easy give for most developers. But the other thing that DPD and CDOT has been doing is forcing the narrowing of driveways, forcing the narrowing of drive aisles. If you have an 8.5-foot parking space, you only need a 20-foot wide drive aisle for two-way traffic. If you have a one-way driveway, they want it to be no more than 16 feet wide, preferably 14, because it slows traffic, it calms traffic, and it creates more pedestrian-friendly environments. And so, to the degree that we could address those sort of things, I think we've done a good job. But boy, there are some places we could do more, especially as some of the buildings and developments age and become irrelevant and hopefully someday get replaced by something different. Let's just say
We
different.
got some nice landscaping of the bone roofing, so.
Yeah.
I am working with them. So I was gonna update you on things that are coming through as developments, things you've worked on, just a couple sentences on each, and then tell you where I am on text amendments. But bone roofing, when I asked to see their site plan, they were working with a nursery, with a well-known nursery, and it was like $9,000 to remove the stone around the base of the sign. And I was, wait a minute, that's a lot of money. We can I have the ability to put the landscaping around the outside of that little knee wall. So I'm waiting for them to call me back. I've been talking with Jackie Pesky via email, and I think they should landscape the green area, and we can get a better effect. Then they chose some very nice species, but they were just going to put them all around the sign in 3 layers. I'd rather see it out on the green, in the green space. So stay tuned on that.
Okay.
Hawthorne Garden, the first 3 buildings have been demolished. The disconnects slowed the approvals. We had struggles to get the utilities disconnected. And Kevin Mantell, our village engineer, was able to step in with NICOR with a contact and get that done. So that was good.
Good.
Yeah. 24 East St. Charles, the second reading will be next meeting. There were some community concerns voiced over conflict with the Walgreens drive-through and a tree at the north end blocking the view. Robin stepped up and said that they had no problem moving the tree. They had flexibility. We'll see where that goes. And I did get another revised plan set on the Union. They've slightly modified the building with the upper level. Remember how it was 2 buildings side by side? And the western one, they stepped the upper level back to kind of lower the massing density at that west end. Patrick Burke and Vasily and I are going to have a conference call hopefully on Monday with them, because I want to get into some questions on what they've really changed, and then they want to be on the May public hearing. Patrick's working with them on the redevelopment agreement, and he's making progress on the TIF district as well, working with TESCA. Moving to text amendments. So I was researching something, and remember that parking fee in lieu I brought up? In 2002 and 2003, the village looked at that extensively. And the P&Z did refer it onto the board, and it did not pass. I talked to Robin briefly about it, and he said he just felt it was a different time, a different day, and we should bring it forward. He thinks there's be support for it, so we'll find out. I did tour downtown with Tony Odo, Angie Rojic, and Dave Casey. They wanted to point out all the parking areas and concerns that they have, and I always appreciate the opportunity to do that, because solutions are closest to those. Just like you said, the neighbors might have some ideas. So we looked at a bunch of stuff together, and I have to get back to them on parking over the Union. I want to confirm that everything they had interpreted is as it's being proposed. So I'm working with Greg to do that from Parks and Rec. I met with the village attorney last Friday on accessory structures. Remember that question about that deck in the side yard at Illinois and Kenilworth? Because the way I read the code, it says you can encroach, it gives you a square footage to encroach into a setback. It doesn't reference the side yard. He said you could interpret it that way, though we probably want to update the code. But so that's my question is, I actually thought it was intentional, given we have so many 50-foot wide lots. Do we want to, the question becomes on accessory uses. First off, we do need some definitions, how to define sheds, pergolas, pergolas with flat work, pergolas without flat work, pools, decks, couple others. If they're accessory structures, we have to define that they're structures and that they do or don't count towards lot coverage. The code for example, in the residential district, it talks about accessory buildings. It says accessory structures at the top of the header, and then everything below is accessory building, or vice versa. So we got to clarify that, because it's, I think some of them have to be called out as structures. I think it's just an oversight. But I thought it was intentional to allow an accessory use, which is always supplemental in supporting the primary use. I thought it was intentional that the way, and it reads that it's intentionally, that you can have those uses in the side yard as long as they don't encroach into the setback, the distance from the road. And it made sense to me, given how narrow our lots are. You can't do those on the side yard anyways. There's only going to be these lots like that one up on Kenilworth where it's 92 feet wide. She's not going to bother anybody by putting a deck on her north side of her house. And Jason and I have been talking about it. Did anyone clue into that? Do you think it was intentional, or Should it have read, don't encroach into the yards?
I was I was on that committee, and I just don't remember that even
Yeah.
being discussed specifically. And
Okay.
I'm sure it was one of those things that was either an interpretation of an existing standard or the straight carryover of an existing standard that, when read alone with no context, didn't jump out.
Yeah.
Especially like you said, we generally speaking, we have 50-foot wide lots that are deep. We have a handful that are on the corner, but even most of those are narrow, long, but this one is a particularly odd case too because of the placement of the house on the property.
Yeah, and we did look on Kenilworth. At first, I thought it would, when I came in, remember I'd written in the memo saying if it was a certain percentage wider, let it be. And then Vasily and I looked lot by lot by lot. It's probably the only one. So that one is very, very unique. I would have had no problem, suggesting she do a variance request. So, because she's not going to impact anybody. So,
Because a lot of them are set, even not set to the corner, but set closer to the corner, so that that corner side yard, the space you have between the setback, the required setback, and the house is generally pretty minimal. But this one is
yeah,
not that.
it's almost a double lot.
Yeah.
So as we go forward, some feedback. Maybe we just handle it by adding a table that says where this accessory use, if it can even be in a side yard. Because you might not want, some towns don't want patios in the front yard or the side yard. Sometimes, though, you've got a house where they built it and the kitchen has a slider door and it's on the side yard, and that was the house style. Well, they should be able to have a little patio on their side yard when they exit their kitchen.
Right.
Any thoughts on how you want to handle this? Because the code reads, don't encroach into the setback. It does not read, don't encroach into a side yard. So the fact that it even says encroach into a setback, usually it says placement in a yard, yes or no. That's what I've seen. So I think it was intentionally written that way.
Yeah, and what's the encroachments table? That's encroachments in
14.3.1, I think.
yeah.
Table 13 and 1.
Thank
is in section chapter 14.
Is that encroachments in yards or encroachments?
Setback obstructions / encroachments.
Okay, so that is
It's a
specifically
setback. It's a
okay.
So I guess the real question is does our code really talk about yards versus setbacks? I mean, we have front yard setback. I mean, but do we ever talk about yards specifically? I mean,
The place that's most clearly lined out is in the fence section,
correct.
where it has that
Rear
diagram.
side versus front, and if you're a corner lot versus if it's a weird triangle lot versus just on the street non-corner lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a place where it's fairly clear, I think, because we do not allow 6-foot fences in front yards, correct?
Right.
And that includes the area between the setback and the front of the house, required setback in the front of the house. It has to step back at the step down at the corner of the house, and then would be 4 foot from the street.
Well, and there are some conflicts too when you've got adjoining districts. If you've got a commercial or industrial next to a residential lot, we came into the 554 South Ardmore, St. Paul Lutheran. Their fence is up against a residential lot, and the owner had asked that the fence go all the way, go further towards the street, and we said no, but it's a conflict in the code, but we asked it to be handled the same way it was done at the library, so that it didn't create a site concern. But it's, at one point it says along the entire length, the question is the fence along the entire length of the lot, or out to the front yard, to the setback? I think I'd have to look at it again.
Yeah, I think I think we had one like that several years back with a fence between a multifamily residential use and a single-family residential use.
Okay.
Um,
Kenilworth Townhomes, I noticed it's right up to the sidewalk. Is that the one you're thinking of?
That could be a P.
no, but yeah, let me see. Is that fence on the commercial? Yeah, that's a tricky one.
And it creates.
Because you would
there's
have a
nice barrier
commercial
there.
rear yard coming up to a residential side yard.
I think it's a side to a side, and at Kenilworth. But for the, let me think. No, the church, it's side to side. That's another thing in the code. The MX districts are interior side yard and street yard, and the traditional districts are interior side yard and external side yard. Should we just make them all street yards? You know, it's
Yeah,
it's a
I would.
differentiation on the external corner. Yeah.
Yeah,
The little
I
things
would
I've been
corner
finding.
side yard
Yeah.
versus.
Yeah,
So,
that's
Good
Yeah.
cleanup item.
that's two people writing two different parts of the code. That's what that is. Yeah, that wouldn't be a bad cleanup item. So it's clear.
and I found some confusion on measurements. I'm still a little peaked on the landscape setback in the MX districts, because it says it's supposed to be 13 feet, but then it says it's from the curb line to the lot line. Well, it is what it is then. How can you make it 13 feet?
From the curb line.
So I don't understand, you know. That was one that I pondered on this project tonight.
Yeah.
So there's little things, and that's to be expected.
Yeah.
So back to Eric's question on setbacks versus, setbacks versus yards. There are definitions. I think there's one less set of definitions. Usually you get like lot, yard, comma, front, comma, rear, comma. There's one less set, and I can't tell you without looking in the code than I've seen in other places. Our definitions are very brief. They're very minimal.
Yes.
That's the way of the modern zoning ordinance. I'm not sure why, but it's
Okay, then I
pretty
guess-
prevalent.
Yeah.
It's a lot of.
It's
I
not
like
a
to
bad
describe
thing.
it as common language,
Yeah.
and have people say, "Well,
It's not a bad thing if
there's
it's
no
clear.
definition," but Oxford has a definition. But it can be confusing sometimes with interpretation.
Well, so Vasily and I are going to work on this text amendment together because he does a lot of the zoning review. He's one of our engineers. And I'm comfortable with it reading, don't encroach into the setback. Some of the items give you a square footage, a linear foot and as to how far it can encroach. Others don't. That might be the key to a little more definition on it. You want to think about that and let me know your thoughts.
Okay.
I'd appreciate your input. We're also going to look at driveway design. 8 or 9 feet show up in different places for width. We need to better define the width at the sidewalk versus the width at the street, because the apron will flare. So it'll be wider at the street than it is at the sidewalk. Usually there's a 4-foot difference, but you talked about it today, the narrowing if you want to minimize your curb cuts. I found in doing the bone roofing, it was in my report, but I just kind of went past it. The imperviousness calculations were changed recently, but they weren't changed for the M districts. So the original way we calculated imperviousness was just building to lot. It wasn't all impervious. And so the M district, the manufacturing district, is 50%. It's not enough.
Yeah, so the change to impervious surfaces that was recommended by Consuelo was just to residential districts. So I guess what we need to clarify was that worded in such a way that it only applies to residential districts, the change?
Right.
I'm not positive without having the code, the
Yeah.
amended code in front of me. And if it applies to all districts, then we need to re-examine each district and make sure that what's there is the number we want to see based on that change.
Yeah, like Hanover Park, which had the big industrial parks, was 75 and even 90, I think. I'd have to look again. But just because you have all those expanses of parking, you've got trucks coming in and out, you know, it's just 50% is not enough.
Right.
So, storage containers, says non-residential districts. Does that include the MX districts, meaning they're not allowed in the MX districts? Is it just the M and C districts? Did you guys talk about that?
I'm not sure I'm following. It's
The code reads that, and maybe Eric can pull it up, the code reads, the new storage containers, that they're permanently allowed in non-residential districts, but it doesn't specifically call out the districts. So does that mean anything but an R district, or does it mean
So that's
only a C or an M?
Which one?
it's under what, chapter 6,
Yeah,
11?
point 12.
yeah.
611 and 612 now, because it's
It-
permanent versus temporary.
Yeah,
And nowhere in 6 does it list out the districts. It just says non-residential.
right.
Yeah, I mean, I think
We've
the
been beaten to death.
intent would have been to include the MX districts, because some of the ones that we have that are existing are in MX districts.
Yeah.
I mean, Pioneer's
I know that.
Pioneer's the most obvious example, because Angie's been here frequently and we're familiar with hers, and hers one is one that is actually a pretty easy one to clean up and
I
fit
hate
the-
to open this up.
yeah. So
we might just want to stay.
I would say that there's that. Yeah, I would say that it's fine the way it is.
So it includes everything but an R.
Yes.
Yeah, if it doesn't start with an R, it's applicable.
Got it.
I agree with that interpretation.
And I
Yeah.
think, though, that it might be clearer if
Though-
we added it into the use table. The 6.1 table.
The issue, I don't want to say the issue with it. Do we have other temporary uses
We have temporary outside storage in the M district in there.
in the table?
But that's under warehousing and, because they're grouped by
Oh, yeah,
business
that's-
types. That's my question.
Because we have a whole laundry list of temporary, of permitted temporary uses, ranging from signage to pods to, I mean, we could
And they're not all in
theoretically,
the use
we
table,
could
yeah.
theoretically add all of them to the use table, but it seems odd to just add the one.
Okay, I'm good with that. We've clarified the policy that it's anything without an R in it, so, okay. I did find a little quirk, no temporary tents are allowed in the MX districts, and we've given Jewel their garden center tent forever. I'm not sure how to get around that, they got zoned out of that.
We gave them their garden tent forever.
They've had outside, every spring they do their
Oh, yes.
their garden sales.
Yeah.
And the code reads under temporary uses, tents only in the C districts. They're not a C district. They're an MX, they're MX zone now.
That's probably something that got missed
Right.
when, yeah.
Yeah,
'cause
that's why I said they got
we
zoned
would've-
out of
We would have
their
only
tent.
had C, right,
Yeah.
it would have been C districts at the time, so.
We gave them their permit this year.
That may be
For it.
one that we need to
Okay.
address.
I'm not sure how to address it, but
Um,
yeah. That's what I had. Just wanted to let you know, those are the ones I've been talking with Vasily and the attorney on. So,
Any update on the Casey's for the northeast corner?
Yeah.
Sorry, southeast corner of North
Yes.
and
yes.
Ardmore?
We just sent back one more round of small comments, and we're waiting for their escrow fund.
Okay.
Yeah, they're hoping to start in May.
which one was that?
Casey's,
Oh.
Bucky's to you, maybe?
Formerly Bucky's.
Formerly Bucky's, now Casey's, yeah.
Casey's, formerly generic, generic gas station to be
Yeah.
formerly Bucky's.
Another pizza place.
fifth chain and.
My wife was a big fan of the Buckies. She's very disappointed that they're all Casey's now.
What is it, Lombard? The very east end of Lombard just put in like a bunch, or had a bunch of money go into that Bucky's that's now going to become a Casey's
Yeah.
on North Avenue,
Oh, yeah.
off of Swift,
Yeah.
that, like unincorporated area of Lombard.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think it's giant.
was that all of the pending text amendments from the original omnibus text
I
amendment?
think that we still
Thing.
have to do the landscaping one,
What about landscaping?
the shrubbery.
Oh,
the
that was
dri-
related to
around
the driveway. That
Oh,
was
the
related
circular
to
drive.
driveways.
Okay, all
Yeah,
that's
that was
the,
related
all
to the
that's the driveway
driveway.
one. Okay, it's that. Accessory structures and buildings.
I also think there might have been one or two definitions that should have been updated that weren't.
I agree.
When
I
things
think
got-
we did catch that in
when
the
things got
definitions.
separated.
Yeah, definition section. I think that we caught.
Let me know if you know which ones you felt you needed. I'll look
Uh,
also.
it would have been in what the trustees went on to describe as an omnibus
Yeah,
proposal.
I believe I sent you a memo. I could resend it, but I believe there were some definitions that went along with the changes to impervious surface
Okay.
that were supposed to be updated, but
I think some of those were made for impervious surface. I think I saw that. Definition changes.
so verify that there were like I think 3 or 4 that were supposed to change.
Okay.
And make sure all of those changed, because I think when I read the ordinance that ultimately got passed, there were, after the fact, I noticed, I think Consuelo had intended to process the definitions like as a separate portion. She broke it up into sections, and one of those sections was updates to definitions.
Yeah, I know semi-pervious surface, 40% absorption of water was added, I believe. Impervious site coverage, a percentage of a lot. It was defined, the percentage of the lot developed
Okay.
with principal or accessory structures and impervious surfaces and lot coverage.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I
I'll
thought
double
those
check
3
and
were
make sure.
made.
I'll double check and make sure
Okay.
that everything that.
Entertainment is something, but I think that's being handled through the police chapters right now for noise and.
The nuisance ordinance, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And, let's see. I do have, the original, I think this was the original, February 4th, 2021, memo to the P and Z.
Yeah, there were changes after that.
Right, but I went back just to see, okay, what didn't get done, you know what I mean, to kind of,
Oh, I think one of the other ones.
Yes. We made changes in April, though, that's my point.
okay.
One section that or a couple sections that we might not have talked about yet on the text amendments were section 11.6 administrative adjustments. There were some proposals that we discussed there, and also 11.3.13 effective period for PUD. I might be wrong, but I don't believe the trustees
I agree
have
that both
had
of
that
those,
presented yet.
yeah, I agree, and I wasn't gonna touch the administrative adjustments.
Okay.
I didn't think that asking for staff to have more ability to make common sense changes was gonna be received well, so,
Given the transition in both management and at the staff level, it's probably best to just wait and approach that later.
I do have an email from Leslie, who wrote the code, regarding the one we talked about tonight. And she wrote, "Hi Craig, technically yes, Ellen is correct. The garage door entrance can be located on the side facade of the building with an administrative adjustment. However, the driveway language is written to only allow an administrative adjustment for a driveway off of a primary street. The intent is to have all access in the rear. especially if there's an alley, reducing the number of conflicts with pedestrians on the side streets. So I was reading that there's an alley, it has to be on the alley, and that it had to be a variance, that I
Yeah.
could only make the adjustment if there was no alley. So,
Yeah, I'm okay with whatever interpretation gets us to that. I mean, the desired result is the same.
yeah, and I'm always gonna be conservative, you know, the bone roofing PUD could have gone through as a minor, but I felt because it was above the 5% percentage and the height was that I had to take it before you guys. I just felt it was safer to do it that way, and I'll always err that way. Yeah, but you're right, the PUD thing was in here. Yeah, it was, so. Oh, and you know what it was, Jason, here I'm seeing in this, the table for the encroachments. What was added was private surface walks up to 5 feet unless connecting to existing sidewalks which are wider, in which case the width shall be the same as the existing sidewalk.
Yeah, and so that's where like the table got forwarded to be reinserted, but
Yeah.
that's portion didn't get forwarded because it was when the omnibus bill was split up. That one was moved into the sidewalks and out of the table. Splitting that up, I understand why the board wanted to try to digest those a piece at a time, but it became really hard to break up because it was pieces all over the ordinance.
And the ordinance didn't say that that should be replaced in its entirety. It read as if it was a new table. So, yeah, but that's what I'm seeing in here, at least in this memo.
And that's probably just say an error in the way the ordinance was written, for lack of a better term,
Okay,
because that table did exist.
yeah. So if you think of anything else that we've missed, you know, Jason has helped me go through and find Consuelo's materials. I think I've got the list of them. So, the only other thing that might be of interest, we had a really great meeting Wednesday with 9 of the 11 property owners on Stone Road to talk about property maintenance and how,
Oh, on the north end of town?
yeah.
Okay.
Lack thereof, property maintenance.
Yeah.
that-
Lack thereof, yeah.
Well, it's only in the last year or two that we've had this proliferation of autos on the street, and we talked about the need for COs, the need for zoning review. These cars can't be stacked 3 and 4 from the building. That we're probably going to look to go to an easement agreement like we have in 2 other areas of town. And if things don't get better, you know, we have the potential to post no parking in the right of way. And they were all very amenable to working with us, so it was a very good meeting. So,
I'd say some of them, you couldn't even tell what kind of a business that they're running.
That has something to do with cars.
Yeah. Yeah, but it doesn't look like a good thing that they're doing with cars.
No. And
Hopefully this will be a good mitigation strategy.
I think that's a point that some people missed, because some people say, well, how can we put no parking up there? Because every time I drive by there, I see people parked there. If we put no parking there, well, then where will those people park? And I want to say those people that are parking there aren't people. They're cars from the businesses.
Oh.
Whether it's a repair shop or a body shop or a chop shop or whatever. Most of them, I mean, not all of them, but some of them are employee parking, which, you know, when you're in a sort of Imish district, I understand that. But when you start talking about them pushing their product, for lack of a better term, whatever they're working on into the street, which I know is some of it in some of those locations.
that's the concern.
That's the concern.
Yeah.
All right. Any other comments to make? Other than go Willowbrook for finishing second in the state in the theater department in the contest play and winning best overall technical production at state 2 weekends ago. Go Willowbrook. Other than that, I don't got anything. All right. Motion to adjourn? Yep. All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.